Hello, this is Eric Anderson. I am the owner and chief architect here at Shooters Technology, and today we're going to demonstrate how to move an athlete from one firing point to a different firing point during a competition. Now, to start with, let me go ahead and show you the environment that I am working with. On my range, I have a 4 firing point range with Athena. And in the match that I have created, I have 6 athletes squatted on 2 different relays. The match itself is a council rulebook with a 40-shot standing course of fire. Now, to start talking about how do we move an athlete during competition, well, it starts with planning ahead. You have to accept the fact that electronic scoring targets, like all mechanical systems, will eventually fail. We don't really like to talk about the fact that mechanical systems will fail, but all mechanical systems will eventually fail. And Murphy's Law says that your ESDs will fail during a match. Again, we don't like to talk about it, so what we have to do, though, is plan ahead. We have to have a contingency plan. And our recommendation, our best practice for this, is to have one firing point on each relay designated as a hospital firing point. And what a hospital firing point is as the match is progressing, it will follow the same commands as a regular firing point, but nobody will be shooting on it. That is until you move an athlete to that firing point. All right, so let's see how we do that. So again, in my range, I have 4 firing points, and on my first relay, I have 3 athletes. So I'm going to go ahead and push the athletes to the firing points. When I do this, Orion's going to ask me how do I want to handle the empty firing points. Remember, following my best practice, I have 1 empty firing point on the relay. I did this while I was squatting. And the default answer that Orion gives you is include these empty firing points as a hospital firing point. There are, of course, other options, but I'm going to take the default selection, as include them as an empty firing point. And I'm going to go ahead and push the relay out to my Athena range. Now, it does take a little bit of time, of course, to push the relay out, but you'll notice now that I've done so, I have my 3 athletes squatted on firing points 2, 3, and 4. And on firing point number 1, it's listed as being a hospital firing point. Now, to move the match along, I am going to purposefully speed through the initial range commands for this 40-shot competition. But you're going to notice that both on firing point number 2 and firing point number 1, the hospital point, we are getting the same commands regardless of the fact if it's a hospital or an actual athlete squatted on that firing point. Now, I'm going to, like I said, gonna speed through the commands here, and I'm going to get to the start command of the actual competition, the record fire shots. All right, so here we are, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the simulation on to start firing some shots on the different firing points. All right, and as I do this, again, on firing point number 2, the athlete is shooting much faster than you would in real life. Again, this is for demonstration purposes. And I'm going to go ahead and stop after this athlete, Camila Garcia, has fired 5 shots. All right, so there we go. So let's go ahead and pretend that the firing point number 2 has broken down. The athlete should raise their hand, get the attention of the range officer, and the range officer can go ahead and, officially say, yeah, your firing point's broken down, we need to move you. And because you have planned ahead, you can move the athlete to firing point number 1. Now, as the athlete is physically moving their equipment to firing point number 1, the Orion operator has to move their scores from firing point number 2 to firing point number 1. The way that we do that in Orion is go over to the Match Competitors tab. And again, we'll see Camila Garcia squatted on firing point number 2 on relay number 1, and we want to move her to firing point number 1. We do that exactly as you might think. Just under the firing point column, change it from firing point number 2 to firing point number 1. Orion's going to ask you to confirm it. And in a few seconds, as you can see, the shots that Camila has already fired were moved from firing point 2 to firing point 1. Now, once the athlete is ready to start shooting again, as all of you should know, the athlete is allowed to go back to sighters and have, depending on the rule book, unlimited sighters, again, depending on the rule book, for a specific amount of time. Now, we're working on the tools to make this process a little bit easier. But for the moment, the range officer has to pay attention and kind of guide the athlete through this additional sighting period that they are awarded. Now, again, we are working on the tools to make this a little bit easier, but for the moment, the range officer, as the athlete is firing their additional sighters, should make a mark as to what those sighters are. So I'm going to go ahead and simulate 2 additional shots that, for this demonstration purposes, are sighters. And again, this is between the athlete and the range officer. All right, so at this point, let's say the athlete is ready to move back to competition shots. So the 2 shots that they fired, and let's go over to the match scoring tab in Orion, and it was a 10.4 and a 9.9. Because these were sighters, and again, the range officer and the athlete were in communication about this, they need to be deleted from Orion and deleted from Athena. So I'm going to go ahead and select the shot, say remove shot, delete the shot, accept changes, confirm it. And yes, I do recognize that there's a lot of confirmation going on here, but that's fine. And again, I'm going to do this for both of the sighter shots that the athlete took. Delete, confirm, and now the shots are removed both from Orion and from Athena. The athlete at this point can go ahead and resume firing their competition shots. And you'll notice on firing point number 1, the first 5 shots were moved over. They, of course, don't change even when the athlete is moved. And the athlete is now continuing to fire, and the competition shots are coming into Orion as expected. Now, the last thing to talk about when we talk about hospital firing points, as we said, you have to plan ahead. The downside to having a hospital firing point is you lose one firing point during the relay that a real athlete could be firing on it. And really, there isn't a perfect answer to this dilemma. If you have a hospital firing point, you can deal with the contingency that a firing point breaks down. If you don't, you can have an additional athlete. Our recommendation is to have a hospital firing point, but that ultimately is a decision you as the match director has to make. So anyway, there it is. That's how you move an athlete from one firing point to another. In review, always our recommendation is to have one firing point designated as a hospital firing point during each relay. And if you do have to move an athlete, you come over to the Match Competitors tab, select the new firing point, hit enter, and Orion will take care of the rest. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.